What up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fitness Stuff for Normal People podcast. I'm Tony.
And I'm Mariana.
And the fitness industry right now is really not what it could be. It's become something built on unrealistic expectations, aesthetics, and external validation, just directing attention away from what actually matters. The bottom line is we're not just trying to provide another fitness podcast. There are enough of those, but completely change the fitness industry for the better by actually giving you the knowledge and tools so you have the confidence in applying the best possible training and nutrition into your own life. Where today, I think it's fair to say I have a rather long list of things in the fitness industry that annoy the crap out of me. It's starvation or crash diets, cheesy influencers promoting skinny products just to make a quick buck. The clean eating cult really gets under my skin. And people who shove cardio down your throats without real reasons why. And today we're doing just that, a deep dive on the why behind cardio. We aren't just going to talk about the different types of cardio and how much you need to do for fat loss or maintaining a lean physique, but actually get down into the different effects cardio-specific training has on your health compared to other forms of exercises. And then talk about how much you really need to be doing for fat loss, for building muscle, or just for overall health and longevity. We'll get into telling exactly what kinds of cardio, how long you need to be doing it, and how to structure it in your program to make the largest benefit for whatever goal you have. But first, I have a question. Do you think our audience is a bunch of boobs?
Is it a bunch of what?
A bunch of boobs. Are they a bunch of boobs? Like babies?
No.
Babies?
No.
Okay.
I
didn't think so either. I don't think so either. I was about to dare him. But if you're the type of boob that backs down from a dare, I double freaking dare you, if you're listening to this right now, to take the next 10 seconds to go leave this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you are listening to us on. We choose to stay on our own instead of partnering with a big media company that would make us do scammy ads, and dropping us a 5-star rating is the easiest way you can help push this show out to more people. And shout out to Miss Lauren K, the winner of our 100th episode giveaway over the past 2 weeks. If you've been listening, she just won a quick $250 worth of Legion athletic supplements and a free year of FS Premium. Lauren, check your DMs on Instagram and we'll get you taken care of.
And if you want more after each episode, you can join us on Fitness Stuff Premium for just $5 a month, where you get a bonus episode every single Friday where we answer your own questions. You also get access to full training programs like our high frequency full body program and ultimate push pull leg program, along with all of the other mobility programs we just put out. And you get other sick perks like weekly Legion supplement giveaways, exclusive discounts, and much more. You can go ahead and sign up in the show notes below. And a quick shout out to our sponsors from day one, Legion Athletics. If you need to restock on some protein powder or pre-workout, the essentials for the new year, we cannot recommend them enough. We love them for countless reasons. 100% of their supplements are backed by a scientific review board. They're third-party tested, and they even have a no questions asked money back guarantee. You can use the Legion link in the show notes below, or type in FSPod at checkout for 20% off your first order, or double points on every order after that.
Do it. We're in for a hot
my
day.
Olipop.
She's cracking an Olipop. I'm off of 1 hour of sleep. I don't know if I've talked about it on here. Do you watch anime?
I don't. My boyfriend does, though.
Because I try not to judge people. But when I was younger and I wasn't as mature, I would judge people for watching anime. I didn't get it. And over the last couple of years, I've gotten freaking hooked. And I was up last night until like midnight because it was Jujutsu
people love it.
Finishing up this season. It's insane. I literally checked my Oura ring and my heart rate was elevated. I was trying to sit there, go to bed. I'm like, this is not going
That's
to work.
probably me when I'm reading, to be honest. That's how I feel when I'm reading. Like,
Probably is.
depending on the book I'm reading, no chill.
It's bad. The effect it has on your sleep score. No bueno. But today we're talking about a topic that, one, I'm shocked it's taken this long to talk about, but one that I almost see, I don't want to call it misinformation, but the least amount of detail in information given when people talk about this subject. That is cardio. Would you agree? I feel like not a lot of people go that deep into it.
Yes, I think there's a lot of blanket statements with regards to cardio and its effect on fat loss or health, or the best way to do it. I think there's a lot of...
Definitely.
It's positioned as black and white versus giving the longer explanation, which is why we started a podcast in the first place, because a lot of this shit in the fitness industry requires a much more detail than the nuance you see on social media.
That was the nail on the head. Because that's what it is. It's a lot of blanket statements.
Should we put that in our intro?
We probably should. Write that down. But It's one of those things that they do just throw blanket statements on, and no one really talks about how much you need depending on what goal. And here's what blows my mind too is with almost anything we talk about, whether it's a supplement to take, a type of workout, how you should structure the rest of your life, the first thing you need to know is what goal are you working towards? Because the answer depends on that. All of this food is not always good or bad. It depends on what goal you're looking for. A Big Mac could be super helpful if you're trying to do a dirty bulk, not so helpful if you're trying to lose fat. Like good and bad takes context, but cardio that's not really given to that much. And it's very interesting, I think, when we dig it down. And I think the most blanket, what's the most blanket statement you hear people throw it on? The most I hear is just people say, you just got to do cardio because of your heart. And they just leave it at that. Not why, not what, not how much, nothing else. Just do it for your heart kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Is that what you hear the most?
I don't think I hear that the most, but often I would say that, I mean, fasted cardio is best for fat loss. This is the best fat burning zone for cardio.
I do like that one.
There's so many. High intensity is best or low intensity is best. There's a lot of arguments, I would say, that can make it very confusing.
Absolutely. Especially, I think, in terms of fat loss. It's one of those things where if you look in the gym and you walk in, half of the equipment in most gyms is cardio equipment. I think some of the newer gyms, the more hip or with it gyms, like the one I'm going to, the Compound in San Diego, their cardio is limited to like maybe 10% of their space, which I think is kind of how a gym should be.
Is that the one I went to when I visited? It has a few locations.
You went to Fit on Mission Beach, the cool one that's like right on the beach. That was a cool one.
Because they also didn't have much cardio. It was insane. It was so nice, but their cardio room was really small.
Yeah. And I think that's how it really should be structured, because this shouldn't make up the bulk of your training for really most people, unless you absolutely love it. And we're going to talk about that later, because that definitely plays a factor into it. But before we jump into exactly what kinds, what types, when to structure it, where to put it, how much you need to be doing, I think we first have to understand the cardiovascular system. I think we got to start there, because cardio training is short for cardiovascular training. So we first want to understand the cardiovascular system, which is also known as your circulatory system. You can use those two interchangeably a little bit, but basically it is a network that's primary job is to transport blood throughout the body, right? And everything involved with that. Blood, kind of important here and there for a lot of things. Kind of, it carries your oxygen, hormones, nutrients. It is like the bus or the transit system in your body that carries the nutrients, the hormones, the nutrients to every cell in your body in order to survive. Right. So the system is important, right? It's made up of your heart, your blood vessels, which are your arteries, veins, and capillaries, and your blood, right? So when we're talking about really any system in your body, there really isn't a way of describing how complex each different system is, like the endocrine system or the hormone system or your circulatory system. It's very complex. And we've talked about complex versus complicated problems before, right? And the big difference we want to separate there. It's been a minute, though. It's been a minute. Think of complicated systems are systems with a lot of moving parts, but these parts have a more predictable, well-defined set of interactions, right? Something that you could take apart and put back together pretty easily, right? Like a car engine or an assembly line at a factory, where a complex system might have just as many moving parts, but the parts interact in an unpredictable way. And they depend on each other in unpredictable ways on top of that. So you can't really fully understand a complex system without understanding the different components from all of the other systems it interacts with. Think of a complex system being like the weather or the economy, something you really cannot predict in structure, but you can get more familiar with each piece of it. The cardiovascular system's no different. It works close with every system in your body: your respiratory system, your digestive, your endocrine or hormone, your nervous, your immune, your musculoskeletal system. Every system in your body plays with your cardiovascular system. So this plays a pretty big role. And do you like to rank? I don't like to rank them in most important. I'm not going to say the cardiovascular system is more important than anything else, but it's a big player.
Yeah, it's hard to rank them, but when you think about how interconnected it is with every single other system in your body, that's why I would put it up top. Not like any others are unimportant, but just for the role it plays in every single other function in your body, it's involved.
It's like talking about like best friends and friends. It's like, my friend, you're still my friend if you're a friend. Are you my best friend? Or are you the most important? Maybe not. Maybe not. Because the way I look at it is, when you look at cardiovascular disease specifically, or the breakdown of the cardiovascular system is basically what cardiovascular disease is describing. It makes up the two leading causes of death globally, heart disease and stroke. So if someone you know dies, morbid side of it, it's probably at the fault of their cardiovascular system. And this is what usually gets people as they grow older and older. But the number one and number two leading causes of death globally have to do with the failure of this system. And I think that alone shows how important it is, outside of just talking about if we want to look good, if we want to be able to take our shirt off at the beach. This kind of matters from like a longevity perspective, which I know you and I are clear on. That's like a big part of our goals. I think our audience is too, wouldn't you say?
I think so too. And it's the leading cause of death. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in the US. So you look at globally, but then you go on to a more smaller scale in the United States, that's the leading cause of death. And it is interesting to me how I still feel like people attach cardio more so with fat loss and losing weight than with just for heart and longevity. I don't feel like that's absent in like the literature and the healthcare system. You have the general recommendation for how much cardio you should do for heart health, but I think in the media a lot, especially on social media, cardio is not highlighted as, oh, I'm just doing this for my heart health. There's a lot of negative connotations with cardio and how you dread it, but you just got to get through it for fat loss. And
and which is even funnier to think, because when you think about, we've drawn this conclusion so many different times on this podcast when we talk about sleep or step count or resistance training. The things that ultimately make you live longer generally also result in a better physique and how you feel, which is almost kind of funny how that works. If your number one North Star goal is to live as long as you can, the things that it takes to do that, you're probably you're going to look pretty dang good doing it, and you're going to feel pretty good doing it. But one thing I do want to highlight, because what we're going to talk about is the different types of cardio training you can do. And this is more specifically talking about the standard cardio that people picture, like on a cardio piece of equipment, running on a treadmill, walking on the stair climber, the rower, the ergo bike, whatever it might be. But really, cardio is anything that works your cardiovascular system. So here's a big problem I have that we're going to talk more about later, but lifting weights improves your cardiovascular health significantly. Many different measures of that. Like lifting weights, even if it is a slower, more strength-based style, still does that. So when you think of improving cardiovascular health, I don't want you to just think of the treadmill or sprints or walks. And that's a big misconception I think people get to, is they think that weights has nothing to do with your cardiovascular system. And that couldn't be more wrong.
Your heart is a muscle. You have to, and you also need to pump blood to your muscles. You want to strengthen it like anything else.
Absolutely. Now, I want to cover the three main types that I've heard of mostly when it comes to different types of cardio. If we could put them into like three different camps. Camp one is something called LISS, LISS, or low intensity steady state, right? This is just a form of cardio when you're doing a lower intensity, longer, drawn out form of cardio, right? Think of like walking or slow jogging. It's a prolonged period of time, but you're maintaining the same pace throughout. That would be camp number one.
And would any workout classes fall under lists? Or like if you think of going to an Orange Theory, Barry's boot camp, would that fall into the other?
I think this would fall more into HIIT, which is the next category. Because I'm trying to think of that. Most class-based workouts that I'm familiar with, whether it's cycle, whether it's an Orange Theory, a Barry's, anything, they are high-intensity interval-based training classes.
Yeah, I can't really think of any.
Especially lower, maybe walking with your grandma on a Sunday morning if you're a good grandkid, but that's not a fitness class. The next category is just that though, high intensity interval training or HIIT training, which is really anything involving short, intense bursts of activity followed by brief periods of rest or low intensity exercise. And you generally just repeat that in cycles for a given amount of time. And this isn't just on one piece of cardio equipment. This can be anything that is working you at a high intensity and a low intensity, which again, you can be doing with weights as well, which we'll talk about how to do that later. Because I know incorporating cardio can sometimes be like ripping off a Band-Aid. Do you enjoy it that much? I really don't enjoy traditional cardio.
I've always loved cardio more than lifting weights, which sucks because it's not as effective for a lot of things. But just because I just feel like I need to get out so much energy, and I like to be getting my, like, I don't know, just that high. It's almost like a high to me. Okay. I love to run. I love sprints. I love running on the Stairmaster. I love like Barry's boot camp classes. I don't do them anymore just because it's like I used to do so much HIIT, and just because I really enjoyed it, but it destroyed my body and it was not effective. I'm not
Because
seeing
it ate up or made up
any
of so much
results
of
here.
your
Yeah.
pro.
Yeah.
Dang, I did not know that about you. So you're a hit girly.
I'm like if I don't do some sort of cardio, I am like an energizer bunny. I would have way too much pent up. I don't know. Like,
Well, and there's a lot of people who are in your camp. I feel like people either
Yeah.
sit in one of two camps, like your camp, love it, it excites them, or my
there's
camp.
not really an in between.
There really isn't.
Yeah.
It's pretty black and white when it comes to this. But
Mhm.
that is what high intensity interval training categorize on. And I think the third category of this, which you can incorporate into HIIT training, would be what's gaining more and more popularity, which is zone training, which has been more and more popular over the years. It's also what some of these higher intensity classes, I think, base their classes off of, like Orange Theory. You have different heart rate zones. And the typical zones that we're going to define here are zones 1 through 5, right? This is just going to pretty much lump in each zone based on a different range of heart rate or intensity during your exercise, mostly just corresponding to specific percentages of your max heart rate, which is difficult to really find out. You really got to push yourself and test yourself, but there's a calculation which you can get a good estimate for. But it starts at the lightest with zone 1, which is about 50 to 60% of your max heart rate. So this is very light intensity. Think warm up, cool down, something that you could do for a really, really long time without needing rest. Going for a walk, maybe a quick walk, probably a quick jog might lift you out of that into the next zone, zone 2, which is more moderate intensity. That jumps up to 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. And I'm telling you these max heart rates, but I am going to add a very important note afterwards, because this is an estimate of where this zone is. Now, zone 2, this is a more comfortable zone, but it requires a little bit more effort. The best way, and I think this is an intensity-based way of gauging what zone you're in, this is what I prefer rather than heart rate, is to base it off of your feeling or what you feel. And the best way to judge whether or not you're in zone 2 is this is where you're working at a pace where your breathing and heart rate is increased above normal, but you could still hold a conversation with someone without gasping for air in between words. So it might take a little more effort. It might not be the best place you'd ever want to hold a conversation, but you still could, right? You and I could be talking back and forth. And we are going to be touching on this zone specifically next, zone 2, because it does hold a lot of benefits compared to a lot of these other zones. And life mainly happens in zone 1, 2, and 5, right? 3 and 4 are moderate, but that's where life mainly happens. Now, once you kick it up to zone 3, this is where we call it more aerobic or endurance training, right? So categorized as 70 to 80% of your max heart rate. Think of this as something that is challenging but doable. Okay, so in this zone, you should be able to speak in short phrases or sentences before needing to catch your breath. But you and I could not be just holding this entire conversation without taking a few deep breaths in between. Here, I hope that didn't sound creepy. Did that sound creepy in your headphones?
A little bit.
But that's zone 3 before moving on to zone 4, which is known as the threshold or the hard zone, where you could really only imagine, where you could only manage 1 to 2 words at a time without breaking for air. So it would be something really quick. I'm going to make myself throw up when I listen to this again afterwards to edit. But right, this is really something you can only maintain for short durations of time and is more beneficial for improving your speed or power if that's what you're looking to get out of your training. And that leads us up to zone 5, which is really your max effort, which is 90 to 100% of your max heart rate. This is your max zone, your sprint zone. You're just performing something at pretty much 100% of your effort. It's used in interval training or sprint workouts and could really only be held for a matter of seconds to maybe a couple minutes at a time. But I don't know about you, people that recommend staying in zone 5 for more than 2 minutes or so, I'm like, have you ever tried to stay at zone 5 for that long? You almost can't.
No.
You almost
There's
can't.
no need to be there unless if you are
but I almost think like
a sprinter or something. I don't even know if you get
even then though, I'm like, physically, I don't think your body can really give 100% for that many minutes. Like go outside and truly sprint, not just run fast, but sprint it like a zombie was chasing you. And I really don't think, but that's my 2 cents on it. But this zone is more for developing fast twitch muscle fibers and improving your anaerobic power. Okay, so those are the 5 different zones. And this is what Orange Theory uses, I think. I don't know if it's these exact 5 zones or if they break them out. This is a standard definition. People change their definitions on the percentages quite a bit. But is this what they mainly use? Did they use this at Barry's?
Barry's is not based off of heart rate zones. But what I find interesting with the rise in dialogue surrounding heart rate zones, because I mean, I remember learning about them back in school, which I feel so old now, but how it was something that they're important to know if you're taking a test or if you're studying someone's heart health in like an exercise physiology lab, like how they can perform in a certain heart rate zone. But they're so unnecessary to know in like a sports setting, like if you are a runner and you're testing your VO2 max and different heart rate zones, but it's for the general population, it's so irrelevant. You guys already know different types of cardio and what working really hard feels like to you versus what being able to walk for an extended period of time feels like to you.
Mm-hmm.
I just think they're over. I personally think the dialogue around you need to spend this much time in this heart rate zone I think it's unnecessary, but that's just my opinion.
No, I'm with you. It's focusing on the thing that doesn't really matter all too much. Like no matter what your goal is, there are some really big rocks and then there's small rocks and there's pebbles. This is kind of a pebble. If you're trying to lose weight, overall being in a calorie deficit, the big things that are going to get you there, that's what really matters. Your diet, your overall training and lifestyle. What your training is made up of can vary a little bit, but it doesn't matter as much. So I'm with you. There's way too much hype and focus, but that's because I think it's cool to talk about. It's interesting to know what your body does in different zones. Like for example, zone 1 and 2, or zone 2 is typically where the fat burning zone has become more trendy over the last year or two, especially with the 12-3-30 workout, which is a great workout. But why it's being sold and why it caught fire is because it puts you in this magic quote unquote fat burning zone, which we've talked about this before. We did a whole episode, I think, on 12-3-30, essentially just breaking down how, yes, that is true. In that state, the calories that you are burning, most of them are coming from fat oxidation. But burning fat and losing fat are two different things. And they do not cross over. Right. So you can spend your entire hour-long workout in this magic fat burning zone and you will burn and utilize more fat for energy in that hour. But your body has a calibration system where overall, if you're still in a calorie deficit, you would lose just as much fat if you spent that entire hour-long workout in the fat burning zone or at a higher intensity zone or at a lower intensity zone, wherever. It doesn't translate. But it sounds good. The fat burning zone, like who freaking would not want to be there?
Yeah.
I would. Like a little magic fat burning place. So it's interesting to talk about. And I think that's where you're right. Like the dialogue, they almost go too much in the weeds with it, where it's too important of a focus. Now, zone 2 specifically does have some interest, or at least that's where a lot of people like Peter Attia, Andrew Huberman, Rhonda Patrick have been putting a lot more focus. And it seems like this is because this zone looks to hold the biggest benefit to your overall cardiovascular system and health. And mostly because in this zone, you're really improving something called mitochondrial density and function, which we don't have to get too into the weeds with this, but it's important to know because, we all know what's the mitochondria? Powerhouse of the
powerhouse
cell.
Of the cell.
Right? The energy powerhouse of the cell. So if you're enhancing that system or enhancing the efficiency of the mitochondria, this is going to translate over and benefit all cardio heart rate zones, all cardiovascular health, because you're improving it at a cellular level, right? So zone 2 essentially just builds you a really strong aerobic base because of how well it improves that system. So to the point, and this is where I think this is cool, if you just focus and improve zone 2, you're going to also notice improvements in performance in zones 3, 4, and 5, all the zones past that without even having to train them, where others don't translate like that. If you train in zones 3, zone 1, 2, and 3 will improve, but zone 4 and 5 probably won't. If you train in zone 4, all the way up to that point, but nothing after. So zone 2 kind of has that special little key to it, and it's usually easier to do. This could be something like a quicker paced walk, which is something that most people at least find easier than spending a lot of excessive time in zone 5, which makes you want to throw up after a minute, right? So it essentially just makes the metabolism of each cell better with glucose metabolizing in each cell, every piece of it. And that's why it's garnered a lot of attention. But I find there to be I want to hear your take on this. I have one really big problem with zone training and people who are obsessed over zone 2 is because that is the basic definition, the one we gave. That is the standard basic definition, 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. But zone 2 is really describing a state in your body. And there's a cellular definition of this. For example, the cellular definition is that zone 2 is the highest amount of energy you can put out while keeping lactate below a measurement called 2 millimole. Okay. And you really can't measure this without a lactate test, which can cost a lot of money and you need a blood sample for it. Right.
Yeah, we used to do them in exercise physiology lab. You do a finger prick.
Yeah.
And you test your blood lactate. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's how you really can, the only way you can really guarantee how your body is expending that energy. And here's the interesting part, because Dr. Peter Attia, he does a lot of deep dive into this, but he can do the same identical cardio workout 2 days in a row. His heart rate can be nearly identical. One day he'll have a blood lactate level that puts him in zone 2. The next day it'll be too far out of zone 2. The same workout, the same heart rate, the same everything. To your point where people are obsessing over this, it's almost impossible to tell exactly where zone 2 is. You can have the same feeling, same everything, but it's measuring something that's going on in your body, which you really can't know for certain. And that's my biggest problem with people who obsess over spending times in each zone is because you really can't tell how much time you're spending in each zone. You can't. That's the biggest problem I see with it.
I've always thought that. And it's based off of generalizations of your individual zone and what you need to do to get there. You can really only know that, again, from going into a lab and testing your lactate threshold. It's always been something that has blown my mind because it's important to understand for research and for athletes. It can be really important, especially for runners. But if you want to know the why, it makes sense. But other than that, using it to guide your training is such a waste of time because
it just takes up so much mental energy to spend that much time thinking and obsessing over it, where it's like, okay, is this meaningful?
And especially people who use it really to guide what's best for fat loss. There was this 2017 systematic review of 31 studies that concluded that there was no difference between high intensity interval training type cardio and moderate intensity cardio training for any body fat outcome. There's a lot of research that shows when you put this into play, when you look at it in human beings trying to lose body fat, the difference is very negligible. There's little to no
and that's
difference.
what we do want to be clear with this too, because that's what we're talking about is for most people is who we're talking about. This doesn't matter for most people.
Yeah.
If you are a next level athlete or you're really working on improving some aspects of your endurance, it might be worth it to invest in a blood lactate test to actually really get specific on which zones and how much time you're spending in each one you're training for. But for most people, for physique enhancement, for health enhancement, this isn't meaningful to know.
Yeah.
This is not meaningful to know. So I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter for most people. And that's where a lot of the emphasis is put on by that. And another point just on this type of cardio piece, back on the weight training aspect of it, you have to realize lifting weights is also going to work on your cardiovascular system. And I've never seen this before putting together research for this episode, but it was an awesome meta-analysis from researchers in the UK. And what they did was they compared moderate to high intensity resistance training to cardio. And then they measured specific cardiovascular outcomes. And what you notice is lifting weights decreased both systolic and diastolic blood pressure. It decreased resting heart rate. They saw a significant improvement in VO2 max and a reduced level of fasting insulin and levels of insulin resistance, all from just lifting weights, not a minute of traditional cardio involved with it. And when you look at most research surrounding this, yes, they both provide benefits. And usually when you couple them together is when you get the most benefits. So doing weights and cardio in a routine oftentimes gives you more benefits, not just for physique enhancement, but just cardiovascular health compared to either one on its own, just cardio too. So I hate this argument when people are really bashing, even honestly, just gym bros who don't like to do that much cardio outside of their step count, but lift weights at a high intensity. They're like, oh, do you just not care about your heart? It's like their heart health is probably at a much higher level than most average Americans. That's what I really hate the most.
The recommendation based off of the physical activity guidelines for Americans that is reviewed and set each year in terms of how much cardio you should be doing for
Hmm.
heart health, 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity physical activity. This can include walking, like biking, dancing, any sort of light to
Yeah.
moderate intensity physical activity. It counts. That's all you need to do. 150 minutes per week or 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity physical activity. So this could be running, HIIT, hiking. You don't have to put all these hours into cardio. You can almost meet this 150 minutes per week by doing a 10-minute walk in the morning and a 10-minute walk in the evening. That's
And
140 minutes per week right there.
a lot of
Like,
this is categorized too as physical activity, correct? Not just
you don't have to
climbing
do a
or whatever.
structured cardio machine ever. You don't have to ever, which might sound controversial, but you don't for
Yeah.
heart health. If you don't want to, fat loss, which I know we're going to talk about a bit more later, but if you want to make your deficit a little bit easier, so you do a little bit more intense cardio during a cutting phase or something, like, okay, that makes sense. It's going to maybe help a
Yeah.
little bit, but
Yeah, but when we're talking about heart health, it's overblown, I think, a little bit. It's overblown.
yeah.
Where I know when you listen to recommendations from we were talking about this before the episode, health professionals, it's like, well, you should optimally aim for 3 to 4 hours a week in zone 2, and then 2 to 3 hours of high intensity work, and then 3 to 4 hours of resistance training a week. Who has this much time in a week to dedicate towards training? I guarantee these professionals don't. No, nobody does. Like that 15 hours is not going to fit in most people's lives. And you can really work it. And I think this is why combining the two and learning how to balance them well, weight training and cardio, works so well if you really do want to prioritize longevity, because almost think of cardio versus weight as working the front and back of house systems. That's at least how I see it a little bit. And I've had some structured training programs like this, which were actually super fun, but where traditional cardio is more working your heart, your respiratory system, like front of house stuff, where weight training really helps you target function at a cellular level in a lot of muscle tissue that doesn't usually get attention, like your legs, if you're just running, biking, stair climbing, whatever. Lifting weights is going to help target that more on a cellular level. So it's front and back in house system. So that's why both are going to be important. And that's just from a heart health standpoint. Now, we're going to talk about exactly how to structure your cardio next into a program if your goal is to lose fat, and then if your goal is to build muscle, right? Is cardio your friend or foe if you're trying to build muscle? And I think the big question today is how much cardio you need for fat loss. The short answer is none. Short answer.
Yep.
Short answer is none. Okay. In fact, any exercise, period, is not needed for fat loss. As long as you can maintain a calorie deficit, meaning your body is just burning more calories each day than you're taking in, you're going to lose weight. And you can do that through diet alone. The right exercise makes it a lot easier. And we know this. And it provides a shit ton of other benefits. But if you're looking to improve your physique, not just lose weight, especially weight training and cardio can add that benefit. Now, I think finally people are coming around to the idea that you don't really need an insane amount of cardio to achieve a great physique. I think this was popularized in like the early 2000 teens from like influencers, whatever, who were on copious amounts of drugs, who are just doing like 90 minutes of stair climbers each day on top of their 2-hour lifting, like insane amounts.
The thing is, like, the people who have almost exercise addiction, which is a real thing, or do spend an hour and a half to 2 hours on a cardio machine, yeah, like every day, yeah, that's going to make a difference depending on your diet, but that can definitely make a difference. That is so abnormal. That is so much cardio. It's a possibility for it to make a difference for being in a calorie deficit and really helping there if you do a fuck ton of it.
Because doing it in the right amounts, again, we're not saying it's good or bad, but doing it in the right amounts can be the biggest tool you could keep in your pocket when it comes to fat loss, when it comes to anything else. And we're going to go over the specific recommendations here in a minute, but I think this obsession of overdoing the cardio aspect when it comes to fat loss, it's like very just low level thinking. And this is not like a diss on anybody who's doing it, but like low level, not a lot of depth to it, because it really comes from the fact that basically cardio is the most efficient type of exercise you can do to burn calories. And I think a lot of people are obsessed with burning calories when they think of fat loss, because to the extent most people teach on social media, especially, what a calorie deficit is like, oh, you just burn more than you eat. Period, the end. They don't go into how actually complicated how many calories you burn is, what your metabolism's made up of, what your diet should be structured. They don't go into that context. So when you're like, okay, I need to burn more calories, well, an hour of any type of cardio is going to burn more calories than an hour of any kind of weight training. Like any hour, any singular hour. But like we talked about actually recently in episode 100, it's not going to be building your metabolism like weight training is. It's not going to be actually building and holding on to your lean mass, which is going to be your BFF in just improving your physique and overall health. On top of that, cardio is going to probably decrease your capacity to burn more calories over time, while weight training is also going to increase this. And we went over a few studies in there too. When you compare groups, cardio groups will always lose the most weight in a weight loss trial, but they don't lose the most fat. That's usually the weight training group or the combined group. And that's the big, big difference that we talked about in episode 100. You don't want to just lose weight. You want to lose fat. So when it comes down to specific recommendations, here's what I usually say is one, even for weight loss, fat loss, optimizing your health, you probably want to keep your cardio training to less than about 25 to 30% of your total training time. Meaning if you do 5 hours of weights each week, keeping it to about 1 to 2 hours of cardio spread through the entire week. Okay, that's also if you're doing 5-hour-long weight training sessions, that's a 20-minute cardio session after each workout. No more than that. No more than that is what I'm saying. Now, your choice of cardio would be either zone 2 or honestly anything you truly just actually like. For example, you love HIIT training. So making you and forcing you just do slow zone 2 100% of the time, you're not going to be as motivated to do it and you probably won't stick to actually doing it. And we know consistency is the most important part in any goal, right? So how much, I would almost weigh how much you enjoy the type of cardio above anything else.
Oh,
would you rank it there too?
Yeah. Also how much energy, even though I would enjoy, like overall, I would enjoy the more higher intensity cardio. Some days, especially if I'm working out really early, I don't have the energy to put my all into it. So it's just not going to be as effective. I'm just going to be dragging. I would much rather do the low intensity just based off of my energy levels. So a good guide.
Oh yeah, because you got to think of this, not just what you enjoy, but what else it does to you and your body for fat loss. For example, if high intensity interval training makes you ravenous and impossible to stick to your diet because you're so hungry all the time. I know that's what happens to me and what you were saying happens to you.
That's why
then
I stopped
maybe,
going to berries.
Yeah, maybe sticking to something lower intensity, like walking or an inclined treadmill walk, would make more sense because it's not going to make you ravenous, which makes it easier to stick to the deficit. And remember, that's what will matter in fat loss is you sticking to a deficit, not how much you can optimize what type of cardio you're doing for that 25 to 30% of time you're doing it. But it can be a useful tool, I think, as a sticking point to extend how big of a deficit you're in, because it can lead to several hundred extra calories you're burning over the course of a week. And that can really be enough to actually make the scale move down. Now, when you're doing this for weight loss, 25 to 30% coming from cardio means the other is coming from heavy strength structured resistance training. And we go into way more detail on this on the episode 100, all about fat loss and weight loss, but that's still a pretty big chunk. Now, when you're structuring this, and I know this is what cracks me up, because in doing research for all these episodes, and I know we both do this, we listen to a lot of other people's opposing views, other than just what we have held on our own, to see what they are saying, why they're saying it. And I'm not going to lie, so many of these recommendations were just so far from what's doable for most people, it almost made me laugh. The question becomes, if you're trying to balance cardio and weight training, that's already a lot on your plate. And I see a lot of people recommending to do them in completely different sessions. Cardio in the morning and weights at night, or vice versa, as long as they're separated by 6 hours so the cardio doesn't interfere with the anabolic signals from weightlifting. So you're going to tell the average person, screw average person, even myself who's heavily involved in fitness, how realistic is it that I'm going to stick to a 2-a-day workout schedule to optimize my cardio and weight training 6 hours apart?
No.
No.
Absolutely not. Absolutely
Zero
not.
chance. Like zero freaking chance. Zero chance. It's not like it's going to give you that much of a benefit. So when you're putting them in, I think the one important thing to structure is you're doing your cardio after your weight training. Yes, it does depend. There's like one instance where you'd put your cardio first, and even then it's arguable. And that's if you purely are just training to increase your cardiovascular endurance, period. Not your physique, not your health, not anything else, because you want the most energy for lifting weights, because that's where you need the most energy and what's going to give the biggest bang for the buck. So pretty much in every occasion, you're just as good structuring it after your weight training as you are separating them by 6 hours if you want to really get the extra 1% you can out of it. The other question that you actually brought up beforehand is this fasted versus fed cardio conversation, which I feel like is dying a little bit. I know it was heavy in the mid 2000 teens. Was fasted cardio was everywhere.
I feel like also the beginning of last year too, I noticed it come up a lot, but not as heavy as when I was in college.
Yeah. Well, and it's because when I first heard it, I'm not going to lie, when I was like 19, 20 years old, I was sold. It made a lot of sense logically when you sell it on the mechanism that's at play, where it's like, okay, well, if you're training fasted, that's when your insulin levels are lowest. And we know insulin inhibits fat burning, right? In the moment, fat burning or fat oxidation, not fat loss, just fat burning in the moment while insulin's present. So if you can train and do your cardio where you're burning the most calories when insulin is at its lowest, then the idea is that you will end up losing and burning more fat for fuel because that's what's circulating in your bloodstream. And that makes sense from a mechanism standpoint, but over and over and over and over again, when you compare fasted cardio versus fed cardio groups in a weight loss trial and they match for their calorie deficit, neither one of them loses more fat than the other. Neither one of them. So if you have a big fat meal, if you have 100% of your daily calories an hour before you go into the gym for cardio, which you'd probably throw up if that was the case, but you still stuck to your calorie deficit, you're going to lose just as much fat as someone who fasted and trained as well.
Yeah.
And that's the big distinction. It's like the mechanism makes sense, but whenever you test it out in real life, it does not work. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me too, what's always been so interesting about this conversation to me is that the larger muscles that power you through your cardio routine rely heavily on a combination of carbs and fats for energy. So when you run or bike on an empty stomach, your body will turn to the carb and fat fragments in your bloodstream and in your muscle stores, not to the fat stored in your fat cells to energize your workout. It is very rare for the average person to get to that point of intensity that they're turning to the fat in their fat cells, even if they're fasted. Like you have to be working out for a prolonged period of time and a very high intensity to see that conversion. So I think that's just always been so interesting to.
Yeah. And I think the better conversation to then have is what's better is like what works best in your life. Like, for example, I wake up and work out around 5:30 in the morning. I don't like to eat before I go to the gym because if I slam something down, I don't like to wake up an hour before I go to the gym so I can digest it. I feel queasy, nauseous my entire workout. So I just work out fasted and it works for me. It works for me because you still have just enough glucose. You're not going to, it might give you a 5-10% less strength, maybe, but it's not going to make that big of a difference.
Yeah.
But the one
versus like, I feel like I love to work out at 10 is like, if I can, is my favorite time because I love to eat something at like 7:30 or 8 and have time to digest it. And I feel the most energized. And I love that. It doesn't matter. If I was waking up super early and not hungry, I'm just not going to eat. But it really...
because forcing it can make you hate it even more. If I was forced to eat a meal before I went to the gym, I would not enjoy my training as much. Same thing if you force someone who likes to work out midday after work when they're fed and you force them to wake up and train on a fasted stomach, they're probably going to hate it and they're going to stick to it less. And one secondary piece that we're going to talk about in the muscle growth section, because cardio can actually benefit muscle growth in a number of ways. When you are in a fasted state, that is also when muscle protein breakdown is at its highest. And that's something you really have to consider. That is when you are breaking down the most muscle or the most protein in your body to use as energy, which we talked about again in episode 100. You don't want to do that, right? You want to hold on to muscle.
And you're going to do that before you tap into your fat stores in your fat cells. You are going to turn to your muscle first, which is so detrimental. No one thinks about it. No one thinks about it, which drives me crazy.
It's something that people just don't think about. It's like, oh, I'll be burning or oxidize more fat. It's okay. What about your muscle? The thing that takes a lot longer to build than fat does to lose. And the one thing I know I've talked about here on before, where if you're someone who does work out on a fasted stomach, don't feel like you need to eat. Of course, it can help with performance. But I even just recommend supplementing with 1 to 3 grams of HMB, right? The supplement HMB, which is it's a cheap supplement. I think it's like $10 on Amazon. It's a metabolite of leucine that spikes muscle protein synthesis, but it also prevents muscle breakdown. And that's something that, at least in the morning, I can stomach because I'm empty stomach. Going in a couple pills doesn't usually make me feel nauseous, where a full meal might. So I would say if you're doing fasted cardio, at least consider taking HMB. And even if you're focused and you're obsessed with this idea of doing it fasted, it still keeps you in a fasted state. There's no calories. There's nothing to actually influence your insulin level at all. That would keep you there.
So I have a question. I know some people get really nitpicky about this stupid fucking topic. Say I take pre-workout or have my coffee before I go to the gym. Does that break my fast?
What cracks me up is when you talk
Not that it matters. Not that it matters.
Yeah, but when you talk about fasting, well, what kind of fast? Because some people consider there's a water fast, there's a no food or no solid food fast, where a smoothie still works. I think in most cases, it's anything that contains calories is considered breaking a fast. So black coffee or water or a supplement with 0 calories, that is considered fasting for most people. But again, it's defining on what are you defining as a fast, which is a funny conversation as well.
That's why I asked it, because I totally agree with you. I just asked because I wanted to hear your take on that. Because that question literally doesn't matter, but people ask it and talk about it and have discourse over it. It's like, what?
It doesn't matter, bro. Now, when it comes to muscle growth, is cardio your friend? Or because I think a lot of gym bros are going to tell you that you want to avoid cardio at all costs if your goal is to build muscle. That's at least I don't know about you. You're probably not in the gym bro world as much.
I'm not.
On your side of things, but a lot of gym bros, like if you're bulking, it's like cut out cardio. Cardio is the devil. And it's not, because there's actually 3 really big ways that cardio specific training can help you build more muscle. What? This is also going out to a message for the dudes, because I used to be this dude who uses that as an excuse to not do cardio. I'm just bulking. I can't do cardio. It's going to get in the way of my gains. No, it's not. It's going to help you. But the 3 big ways are: 1, it's going to improve muscle recovery, right? Intense exercise, like you're doing when you're lifting weights, causes damage to muscle fibers, which must then be repaired, right? That's the whole part of the process to grow bigger and stronger muscles. Now, this damage is the cause of the soreness that you feel the next day or 2 following a workout. This is what we refer to as like DOMS, or you've heard people delayed onset muscle soreness. The recovery of that is kind of a complex process, but it's mostly regulated by 2 simple factors: how much of the nutrients needed for repair are brought to the damaged muscle over time, and the speed at which waste products are removed. It kind of can be boiled down to those 2 aspects. Cardio can help your body repair muscle damage quicker because it's going to, 1, increase your blood flow. And this is going to help your body build the muscle back quicker and remove the waste faster, resulting in an all-around quicker recovery. We talked about that in our recovery episode, like what was it, Recovery 101, whatever it might have been, but how increasing your blood flow is the number 1 thing you can do to boost your recovery, right? Number 1 thing. Number 2 is it actually improves, and this is, again, not as significantly meaningful, but over time it can make a difference, but it improves your body's metabolic response to food. So in reality, when we gain and lose weight, some people's bodies store less fat when they overeat, right? Meaning they burn off more excess calories when they're storing them, and lose less muscle when they diet for weight loss. Some people just do that, where more energy is sucked from fat than muscle to make up the calorie deficit.
Those people
Genetics,
suck.
Yeah, and genetics plays a large role in that, but that's just reality. And mainly it comes down to like hormones like testosterone and cortisol, which play the biggest role in this process. And our genetics have pretty much set up our normal physiological range for those hormones, unless you want to jump on TRT, blast steroids, do something like that, right? So a lot of that's out of your control. But another factor is something called insulin sensitivity, which is a very important metric, which is how your cells, or how well your cells, respond to insulin's signals. And being insulin sensitive is highly beneficial if you're eating in a calorie surplus to build muscle. More of that can be used and utilized by your muscle, where being insulin resistant is going to more inhibit muscle growth and promote fat storage when you're overeating. So if you're eating in a calorie surplus to build muscle, which you don't necessarily need, but to build meaningful muscle you do, your insulin response matters, right? So that metabolic response, and that improves with cardio. That improves with cardiovascular training. And the third point is that it just keeps your conditioning up, which makes transitioning from a bulk to a cut easier on your body, right? So it's not like any of these are massive, like you can't gain muscle without cardio, blah, blah, blah. But it just brings the conversation down of, hey, if you're using that as an excuse to not do cardio because you're building muscle because you're bulking, it's not a very good excuse. Because if anything, in the right amounts, it would be helpful.
It's the same shit with I had this aha moment earlier thinking about like how did this come to be, all of these myths and the dialogue surrounding cardio and who it's good for, who it isn't. And you see the same thing with women not strength training because they don't want to get bulky. And it's the same thing, just a different font, so to say. And I feel like,
Oh my God, it is.
When you think about in the 80s, like 80s workout and all of the women in like, that was the big, like the Zumba type of workout, dance type of workout. In the 80s, women weren't in a gym lifting weights. Not having muscle was in for quite some time. And a lot of that was used in marketing for weight loss, like being in those like 80s workout outfits. And then you get into the 90s and it's like thin was in for so long. And I feel like because of the advertising for certain types of workouts for women from decades ago, still have this like lingering fear almost of this is what I should be doing because this is not like lifting weights is for men and it's going to make me big. Like
the same thing, different font killed me because I didn't realize till now it literally is. For me, it was legitimately when I was younger, just an excuse, 100% cognitive bias of me just trying to support my own, I just didn't like cardio. Oh, I'm bulking. It's bad for bulking. No, it's not. I just didn't want to freaking run. That's all it really was. Yeah. And this is important because cardio can also get in the way and prevent muscle building. And this is why the dose always matter, right? The poison and the dose always matter. And cardio can get in the way of you building muscle, mostly by either doing too much cardio or by doing it at the wrong time. Those are the two main ways cardio can prevent you from really building muscle. And if you're a hard gainer or someone who really has a hard time gaining muscle, is what that's categorized, people who just feel like they eat and train, but they cannot build significant muscle. Cardio might make that a little bit harder because it's really, at the end of the day, it's increasing how many calories you're going to need to also eat on top of your day to continue to stay in that calorie surplus, right? Which if you're a hard gainer is already sky freaking high for you, or so it feels for a lot of different reasons. And it's just going to make that higher and harder to hit. And doing too much cardio, on the other hand, even if you're not a hard gainer, especially right before or right after your weights, can really get in the way of certain anabolic signals for muscle growth. So if you're going to do it in aid of, one, your longevity, your heart, but also if you want the added benefits of muscle growth, I would really only recommend 1 to 2 low to moderate intensity cardio workouts per week of about no more than 20 to 30 minutes. And then 1 high intensity workout per week if you really enjoy it. If you enjoy it. But any more than that, and you're going to be pressing on the bounds where, unless they are coming in separate sessions, you're going to have a challenging time building muscle. Yeah. Because one of them is pushing the brakes on muscle building. One of them is pushing the gas. You can't really push down on both of those at the same time. And honestly,
I've done that before.
A lot of people do. A lot of people spin their wheels because they're doing excessive amounts of cardio and excessive weight training. And they're like, why am I not building muscle? Why am I not getting stronger? And then,
well, I've done that, but I've also pressed on the gas and the brakes of my car at the same time.
Oh, in actual life.
I've done that too.
What happens?
It just weird. You don't really go anywhere, but it's not good for your car. I remember doing it in my mom's car, and a lot of smoke came out of somewhere. I don't know. You're not supposed to do it.
I'm not a car guy, so that makes sense to me. But something you can also take into account here, and whenever I'm doing higher intensity training, unless it's sport based, because I have like a more, I guess, athletic background growing up, I hate doing high intensity training that's not competitive or sport based. If it's just on the treadmill or just on the stair climber or just anything else, I have the hardest time to do it. And you can remember, you can do this with any high intensity exercise, right? You can turn your HIIT session into a weight training circuit if you like lifting weights more than traditional cardio. And you can do that with any form of cardio you want to do. For example, you could just choose 3 exercises, like a barbell row, a dumbbell thruster, and an alternating single leg V-up, right? A core exercise. And you could do it more of a Tabata style where you go 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, and you just alternate. That's going to get your heart rate bumping. But
Mhm.
it's sometimes a little bit easier to play with your motivations if you just enjoy lifting weights more than you do traditional cardio. And it has the same impact, if not more. So if you enjoy that style more, do it. All right. But if you're trying to build muscle, I really do recommend trying to keep it to no more than an hour or two of total cardio per week. You can go over that, but just know after that point, it's going to be significantly harder for you to really maximize muscle growth. And extra bonus, and I know this is like you have your cake and eat it too. Extra bonus if you can do your cardio and weightlifting on separate days, right? If you have a mobility day, maybe make that your cardio day, just because the muscle
Mhm.
rebuilding process is a series of different signals that you need to take place, and cardio can interrupt that, right? But if that's not possible, I would just say prioritize lifting weights first. Keep your cardio to 20 minutes or less after your workout. And then again, take HMB. Even if you're training in a fed state, take HMB 1 to 3 grams after your lift before your cardio, because again, that's the best thing you can do to prevent muscle protein breakdown. So after you lift weights, after you've used up all this fuel, you haven't eaten in an hour or two because of before your lift, that's almost more of a safety net to make sure that you're not getting in the way of losing it. But anything more than 20 minutes and you're just going to have a hard time after your lifts.
Yeah. And isn't there also the option to just, you don't even have to do cardio at the gym at all? Is that too crazy to say?
That's insane. No, that's what it is. Sometimes I know people like motivation. If it's just like you're in the gym, you're there, you'll do it. And you know, if you
Yeah.
leave later, you probably won't do it, but you don't. You definitely don't. Because I
Mhm.
think, and this is where, I mean, what do we always recommend doing first? Whether your goal is to gain muscle, to lose fat, especially to lose fat for your health, what do we always recommend doing first?
Walking, increasing your daily movement throughout the day, like
Walking,
number one. Yeah.
which blows my freaking mind because people don't seem to qualify that as a legit cardio workout. Because honestly, it's easy. And when it comes to exercise, easy is usually equated with worthless. And that's not true.
Yeah.
That is not freaking
Or if
true.
you're not sweating and feeling like you are dead after.
Exactly. Like people are like, that doesn't count. Why?
Mhm.
Do you have a reason? Why does that not count? Like what we over and over again, walking, it's easy on your body. It takes no time to recover from. It minimally impacts muscle gain. It usually does not increase your hunger compared to higher intensity forms of cardio. And it has a host of other benefits. We did a whole episode talking about walking and longevity and how that's one of the biggest predictors of all cause mortality, or how long you are going to live is how much you walk every day.
Because if you just do like 30 minutes of cardio on an elliptical or on a bike or something, and then you go and sit all day, and that is your only movement, which for most Americans are sedentary, that is not going to be as beneficial for your overall health as getting in a
Nowhere
few
close.
shorter walks throughout the day and just making sure that you're a little bit more active throughout the day.
Nowhere close. Yeah, nowhere freaking close. And for an example of this, there's a really cool study done by scientists at California State University, represent. And this was with college-aged men and women, but they found that subjects that ran a 10-minute mile burned about 190 total calories, while subjects that walked a 19-minute mile burned fewer calories. No shocker. But of course, it's really not as much as you think. They burned about 111 compared to 190. That's not too much. So if they walked for an hour, they'd burn just under 350 calories, which if you spread that through the day, that's really nothing. And if you do that a few times per week, that's over 1,000 additional calories you're burning per week. And when it comes to fat loss, I think 300 calories being burned during a walk, one, it's just as effective as 300 calories being burned during high intensity exercise. One is not bad. It's like a pound of bricks versus a pound of feathers. They both weigh a pound. But I would also bet that most of them would probably find walking 3 hours per week significantly more enjoyable and more sustainable than running for 90 minutes a week. That's the big argument. That's my big argument with that. So like it truly is, you don't have to make it as complicated as you think. And especially if you are competing and you are getting really freaking lean, you're going to need some extended cardio sessions to develop a certain point of leanness. No doubt about that. But for 99% of people training to lose fat, to build muscle, to live longer, to this, you don't need to pound this in the ground as much as you think. It matters, but you don't need to be dripping in sweat from the gym doing an hour a day. You don't.
I agree.
We should have tested our blood lactate for this episode while we were doing it.
Oh my God, no. Have you ever done a VO2 max test?
No,
Those are
it
insane.
looks
you have a
like
whole
hell.
concoction on your mouth
Yeah.
And
Looks like a
doing a
nightmare.
heat test too. We also had to do heat testing. So you would wear like the bag. So you would test how your body responds to high temperature settings.
Oh my God.
Holy shit. Like we would be passing out.
It sounds like it'd be fun one time and then it'd be like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm over this. Or like
Yeah.
have a friend do it and I'll watch them and like that's really cool to look at, but I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
No, I've never done that, but it sounds fun. I think today's episode was to show you cardio training is important. Sprinting and spending hours on the stair climber, it's not as necessary. It doesn't need to be the certain way.
Yeah.
Unless you're really on that next stage of training, which it has its benefits. But you don't need to spend time thinking about what zone you're in or the optimal X, Y, or Z about it. It's super important for your health and longevity, but I think this kind of stays in line with most things that we talk about in this podcast. Like none of this came up with too much of a shock to me.
No. And if say you have this goal right now for the new year to do more cardio or to integrate, like start doing cardio at the gym, I would first recommend look at your daily movement. If you want to set a more productive goal, I would say to increase your step count over prioritizing doing a cardio session at the gym for sure. For sure. Hopefully that's appealing to people. Hopefully you hear that and you're like, oh, awesome.
It's like people see it as like, oh, well, that's not hard enough. It should be hard. It's like, why? Why should it be hard? Like
You know
people
what
almost want to
pisses
make
me
it
off?
as hard as freaking possible.
Because this shit is hard. Eating in
Yeah.
a deficit, eating in a surplus, like meal prepping, tracking, like lifting. It's hard. Allow yourself to have, this is like one of the very few simple things. Fucking take it and run with it. Holy shit.
Serious though. Like, no, you nailed it on the freaking head. Like this shit. And even doing that consistently is still hard. Walking 10,000 steps a day is not easy. It's not easy, especially if you're a busy person.
It's honestly like a lifestyle change, like how to figure out how to have a more active lifestyle. You have to make some changes to your day-to-day routine for sure.
But look at that. We've talked about our clients on here all the time. Most people can get 90% of the way to whatever goal they have, especially fat loss, without including added cardio sessions at the gym. And you can add it in at the end, but if you're a coach listening, if you're someone going through it, look at the whole picture. Look at the whole picture. That's what we got on Cardio Class 1.0. We hope you all enjoy a little bit. Let us know if you have any questions as always. If you're in FS Premium, we'll see y'all in just a few days on Friday for this week's AMA and another giveaway. You can always sign up for that in the show notes down below. It's just $5 a month. That's cheaper than like literally everything. Netflix, a coffee, you name it. So we'll see y'all on Friday.